Well, hi there, hello, and welcome to the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for tuning in once again to the podcast that brings you news, insight, and analysis from both sides of the football world, the NFL and the EFL Championship. We have a full episode, tons of content to cover, including Jair Alexander to Baltimore, Damon Arnette to Houston. And what does that mean for that cornerback situation? Jackson Dart, what does all the hype mean for him? And then, of course, we have a few extra segments, including our top bust prospects, our top 5 cornerback duos. We have an alternate uniform. We're going to update you also on all the EFL managerial situations going on, including Boro and Bristol City, who hired QPR. Looks like they have their man. Sheffield Wednesday is in deep trouble, and also Southampton might be in some deep doo-doo as well. Sheffield United had a questionable decision come over the last few days, and Wrexham has some rumors swirling about their ownership potentially. Also, we're going to look at Premier League fixtures, that and so much more here on the Pitch Grid, so strap up, get that snack ready, and let's dive right on in. Let's head gridside and talk about Jair Alexander. Yes, yesterday the news broke that Jair Alexander is now a Baltimore Raven. It felt like this was coming, even though, like I said in the last episode, right? The Bears might be a pick that instantly came to my head that he could go to, or the Lions. However, you deep down, we kind of knew that this might be the case, right? He might go to the Ravens or the Eagles. This just seemed like a very Ravens or Eagles type move, right? These are teams that very much are looking to find these cheap veterans that are proven and can come in, be team players, and know what to do and help mentor younger guys. Of course, here in Baltimore, you have Nate Wiggins, the corner from Clemson, who was hurt last year some, but showed some promise. And Jair Alexander could be a perfect mentor for that, along with Marlon Humphrey. This does reunite two Louisville alumni in Lamar Jackson and Jair Alexander. According to a lot of the reports that were coming out yesterday, Lamar was heavily campaigning for this move, so I could definitely see why, because they were teammates in college, and Jair just has chemistry with Lamar. So this gives an extra layer of familiarity. Of course, Eric DaCosta delivers the goods when he is put to the task. We saw this with Lamar Jackson's contract. We've seen this with so many different situations. DaCosta is just one of the best GMs in this league. It is a 1-year, $6 million deal. That includes incentives, by the way. The base salary is $4 million. Mind you, Jair Alexander is a multi-time Pro Bowler, and he is an All-Pro as well in his past. He also was probably one of the better free agents once he hit the market last week. This very much feels like a steal for the Ravens. It really does. However, there are the injury concerns. He is 28, so he's still in the physical peak of his career. However, he's missed so much playing time with injuries. Then, of course, when Alexander was going through all this, there were those swirling rumors that maybe Alexander was playing this up, the injury, more than it actually was, and that he was actually angling for the contract more. I don't know if I truly believe those rumors or those allegations. That's very harsh to accuse someone of something that serious, to fake an injury like that, especially when you're getting paid for that. And I'm sure like the NFL and NFLPA have measures taken against that as well. This Alexander just joins a stacked secondary, right? And like, he has health concerns, right? But if he's healthy, this secondary is loaded, and I mean loaded. Like, you got Malachi Starks in the draft, right? He's considered one of the hardest hitters in this draft, one of the more pro-ready defenders in the draft, and the Ravens got him in the first round. Pair him with Kyle Hamilton. I think I made the comparison when I did the draft recap, that this is like Rodney Harrison and Ronnie Lott as your safeties. No one was going to want to come across that middle and get tagged like they will be probably. Not only that, you're going to have Nate Wiggins, who shows a lot of potential, and you have Marlon Humphrey, who's a very flexible Swiss Army knife corner as well. He can cover the slot, he can cover you on the outside, he's very flexible. He can play different positions, and it's awesome. He's an all-pro and a pro bowler for a reason. Nate Wiggins, like I said, shows promise. He needs to build on that promise, though, and he is the weak link of this secondary. To me, if I'm DaCosta or if I'm Harbaugh, I'm getting Alexander maybe with the hopes that maybe Wiggins starts, right? And if that's the case, Alexander's the backup. I mean, that would make sense with the deal that was made. It's a 1-year deal, prove it deal, right? To see if he can do something. And, if he does well, they sign him to an extension. My thing is, why is Jair going to a place where he might not start? Yes, it's a great move for Baltimore. This adds extra depth, adds veteran presence, adds a lot of positive green flags that would say, yes, this is awesome. But why is he going to a place where he can be a backup when he wants to be a starter? I mean, that was kind of the whole narrative. He wants to be a starter. That's why he's angling for the extension. He wants the max. I guess getting out of this situation in Green Bay is incentive enough to just go and play maybe some spare minutes. And who knows, maybe, this just popped in my head, maybe this is a rotational secondary where Wiggins doesn't have to play all the time, right? Alexander could rotate in depending on matchups, depending on health, all that, right? If you rotate him in, maybe it decreases the burden of expectations on Nate Wiggins. And, you have an all-pro, a pro bowler that receivers are going to have, and quarterbacks are going to have to respect. So, I could see that maybe being a possibility as well. Impact this has, not just for the Ravens. I asked the question yesterday when I made a short about this. Does this make the Ravens a Super Bowl winning team? I don't know. I think it's put them at even higher expectations. We'll get to the Ravens in a minute, but I do think there are some serious implications that this move is made now and has put on the shoulders of the likes of Lamar Jackson and Marlon Humphrey and the rest of the Ravens, including John Harbaugh. The AFC and NFL need to respect this move. They do. Regardless of he's going to be healthy or not, because this shows Baltimore is really meaning business, especially trying to clean up the defense. Obviously, they think that, they need to shore up a few things in the secondary, which the corners were probably the weakest spots, with Wiggins being hurt on the Ravens defense, because linebacker, of course, is very solid. Your D-line is amazing. Your pass rush, and they upgraded those positions as well, the pass rush and D-line in the draft and such. The NFL needs to fear this defense. This could be one of the better defenses in the league. And if this lives up to all the potential, all the hype, I do have questions about Marlon Humphrey at times in coverage. But overall, he's still a very solid corner. This Ravens defense is going to be very fun to watch. As a fan of defensive football, I'm seriously looking forward to it. We are going to get a grudge match of this with Jaire versus Green Bay this year. That's in week 17. I am looking forward to that. Want to see, of course, we always love beef. We love the drama of facing your former team. I'm looking forward to it quite a bit because it's just going to be fun. If the Texans were playing the Browns this year, that might be pretty interesting, though we kind of, I think, all would expect the Texans to win it. But with the Packers being a playoff contender potentially this year, there's an extra little bit of sizzle to this beef because now these teams are both, the Ravens are considered an upper echelon team. Packers are wanting to try to get to that place. There's incentive and wanting to prove themselves on both sides of this. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. Another interesting signing that kind of went very much under the radar this week, Damon Arnette is signed by the Houston Texans. He's the 19th overall pick, a part of the Khalil Mack haul that the Raiders got when they traded him to Chicago. And he was okay. He wasn't great. Really didn't live up to the first round billing. And then, of course, he had the video that he's very infamous for, showing firearms and such. So he was promptly let go by the Raiders. He bounced from Miami to Kansas City, had some serious charges in Kansas City that he was also immediately cut. And then he surfaced back up in the UFL with the Houston Roughnecks. Arnette apparently has played well enough where the Texans took notice of this. Arnette is also the 6th UFL player to be signed by an NFL team this year, which is pretty fascinating. My only thing is, I don't think he's expected to make the starting 52. He's probably competition depth, let's be honest, because while he might have played well in the UFL, I do think there is a significant gap in some ways between UFL and NFL play. And you already have a stacked secondary anyway in Houston. Arnette doesn't feel like more than a training camp body, and his troubled history also is very concerning. Hopefully he's moved on past all of that crap, because those are some serious things he's done. And I'm kind of shocked anyone wanted to sign him in the first place. But that did come across the waiver wire. I mean, maybe he's a special teams player? I mean, maybe that's where he best fits, right? He doesn't have to start in a high pressure position. He just has to be a special teams player. That might be the way that the Texans go with this, if he is to make the starting 53. I don't know if he will. I kind of doubt it, but it will be very fascinating to see, just because his history, his billing as a first round pick talent out of Ohio State, I just don't see him making the roster. The only possibility I do see him making it, like I said, special teams. Corners, often when you get a corner out of UFL, or you get a undrafted free agent corner, or, defensive back in particular, you usually want them to be a special teams guy. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's the case. But I wanted to get on to this. This is one of the more, it's not a huge deal, right? But the Jets did sign Harrison Mevis, also known as the thicker kicker. He is very much known for the name. He's had an up and down career, not really been outstanding or anything, but he's he came out of Mizzou, and was known for, booting long field goals. The one I think he's most known for is beating Kansas State at Mizzou and Columbia. I just don't know if he's actually going to do anything with the Jets. I believe they already have their place kicking situation figured out. So he's probably just a backup in case of injury or whatever. But still, the thicker kicker is probably one of the more legendary names in in the NFL, besides maybe Dicker the kicker himself. Kicker names, I love how kickers are starting to get like these nicknames like this, the thicker kicker and Dicker and all that. It's pretty interesting and kind of hilarious. I love it. I love that we're giving some personality to them, even though they're, not the most inventive at times, but nicknames are always cool. Mevis, hopefully he gets a chance. Maybe he gets a chance to start, and maybe he shows out. That's the hope, right? Hopefully he does, but, it's never a bad thing to have a backup kicker. We've seen teams, have to scramble to sign a kicker. Thinking recently, like the Chiefs, when they had to sign, I think it was 4 kickers when Harrison Butker was injured. So, it's good to have a backup, and you can't blame the Jets for that, but it's going to be very interesting to see, because Mevis really hasn't done much since he left college. I can't wait to see what that will look like come training camp. Another OTA mini camp thing that is coming out. Brian Daboll has been very vocal in his praise of Jackson Dart. Says he is fitting in well, and that the Giants locker room loves him. Now, the Giants quarterback room is fascinating, right? You have Russ Wilson, you signed after he's released by the Steelers, and then you have Jameis Winston, eating those dubs. And then you have Dart, right? You get him in the first round. You trade up into the first round to get him. And he's got the first round potential. A lot of people think that he could do well, and there's others that think he won't. He's got the arm, he's got the scrambling. The decision making is probably the one I question the most with Jackson Dart. I really want to see it before really buying into it, but this is a quarterback room that I don't think Jackson Dart starts in this year, solely because you sign Russ Wilson to a 1-year deal that is very front loaded. And that usually means that quarterback is going to be the starter. I mean, the Giants, let's be honest, we're not expecting much from them, right? However, they've got some promise, they've got some pieces. I just don't know if he's going to start week 1, Jackson Dart. I think that we're probably going to see Russ start. Jameis probably starts out as QB2. Dart probably sits behind both. And Jameis is a great quarterback to sit behind, right? He has really turned himself around since he was in the Buccaneers. He's really made a name for himself as more of a mentor quarterback who can be a great leader in the locker room, especially when he was in New Orleans. The players loved him and the fans loved him too. I mean, there's talk about maybe the Saints wanting Winston back. I mean, that would be interesting, but like still, I could see it starting with Russ, Jameis, Dart, right? And then if Russ doesn't do well by week 5, maybe they bench him, right? And then they let Jameis take a couple of games. If that doesn't work, Dart probably starts because, let's be honest, Brian Daboll is absolutely on the hot seat. That bum is cooking on the grill, and yeah, he wants anything. This is his guy. This is the guy that Daboll wanted. If you are going to really proclaim that this is your guy, you better get that draft pick right, or else your butt and the GM's butt is out the door. And I'm very sure the Giants are at that point with Daboll, because however much that may or may not be on Brian Daboll himself, and however much it may be on Joe Shine, the GM for the Giants, you can't really totally say. It's been 3 years, I believe, since Daboll was hired, and you really haven't seen much. It's been since Daboll took over, and Danny Dimes really had that one good year, and ever since it's been downhill and fast. And yeah, if the Giants go 1-9 to start the year, I think Daboll and Shine are gone quickly. And if Dart, doesn't have a great start to it either, I think people are going to crucify him. And this is a New York market that is incredibly brutal to their sports teams, and I expect nothing but the best. However unfair that may be for certain teams like the Jets, the Giants, and of course they expect a lot from the Knicks and the Yankees, and maybe the Mets on occasion. But the Giants and Jets shouldn't have all these high expectations all the time. But when they do have the expectations, especially when you have a first round pick in Jackson Dart, you better get it right or the butt is gone. And yeah, I think Daboll's job security is about as fragile as a slim piece of toilet paper. It's that thin. I don't trust his job security at all, especially if they start off poorly and the quarterbacks don't do well, because that's what they brought him in. They brought Daboll in to be the quarterback whisperer for Daniel Jones, and he has not been at all the answer in New York. And of course, he's now in Indy where he has a chance to start. And now, his former team is stuck in a quagmire, kind of like his current team. So, I mean, yeah, it's a very fascinating situation. I do think there is some tangible hype to this Jackson Dart situation, kind of like the Cam Ward hype, but it feels a little different than the Cam Ward hype. Because the Cam Ward hype, it's like, okay, this guy's a great team leader, and like, it's not just coming from the coach, right? It's coming from everyone, media personality, and scouts, and coaches, and players. So there's people everywhere saying that Cam Ward looks great, he's a great leader, all that. Meanwhile, Dart, this feels like it's more just from Daboll himself. Who knows how much of this is him trying to gas up his project quarterback that he really wanted, because he's a Josh Allen prototype in his opinion. This better work for Daboll, or yeah, he's gone. So we go from a bad team to a really good team. We're going to go back to the Baltimore Ravens. Like I said, this is a team that has a lot of talent on it. They were 12-5 last year. They finished first in the AFC North, lost in the divisional round to the Bills on that heartbreaking drop by Mark Andrews. And this is a team that, on offense has, they re-signed Rashad Bateman to an extension over this offseason a couple weeks ago. And, of course, you have Zay Flowers, who's the deep, speedy play threat. Rashad Bateman probably is signed to be a wide receiver 1, and, Flowers maybe number 2, or vice versa. They're both interchangeable, I think. Bateman's a bit taller. Flowers is the speedy guy. This is a team that now, with the Jair Alexander signing, like we talked about earlier, there are certain expectations now for this Ravens team. You cannot just sit there and expect to win the North, right? Because this is absolutely the Ravens division to win right now. Because Pittsburgh, you don't exactly know the entire quality of the offense. The defense looks solid, but you don't know what the offense is going to look like with Aaron Rodgers. Depending on what your view is, or you could say Aaron Rodgers had a solid end of the season last year, stat-wise, or you could go from different angles, the drama, all of that. The Steelers, there's a lot of questions on offense. The Bengals have nothing in terms of defense, especially if Trey Hendrickson holds out. They are holding contract discussions with him. But who knows on that front? The Browns, of course, are the ever-living dumpster fire that is the Cleveland Browns. So, the Ravens are expected to win this division. Not only are they expected to win the division, now with this Alexander signing, there is absolutely legitimate talk that this team will win a Super Bowl, or could win a Super Bowl. And I mean, that's totally fair expectations. This is a great defense. They have an offense that has looked solid. They have King Henry in that backfield, who can be a battering ram on defenses. And then, of course, Lamar, with his improved passing, can beat you over the top. And Mark Andrews, of course, is a solid tight end, however much he might be slightly declining a bit. But this is a team that has a lot of talent, a lot of great players, and now it is time for them to deliver. It's time for John Harbaugh to deliver, because we've had these expectations ever since Lamar won his first MVP. There have been expectations, and this is similar with Joe Burrow. The expectations are there for you to compete and win a Super Bowl. Now, the Ravens have always been considered one of the better rosters in the AFC, yet they always find a way to blow it. Now, this year, you can't blow it. You can't. If you're John Harbaugh, how big of a hot warming seat is it going to be if you take this team that has all this talent and all this potential and you go and lose in the wild card of the divisional round again? How warm is John Harbaugh's seat going to be? Because you've had an elite quarterback. This is a guy in Harbaugh who almost at this point is kind of hanging on like a Mike Tomlin as a culture guy and a guy who won a Super Bowl a long time ago. And yeah, John Harbaugh, like, he's great. Like, he's a great motivational guy. Players love him. He's a great players coach. But he hasn't been able to break the glass ceiling again of getting back to the Super Bowl, despite the talent he may have on both sides of the ball. And now this is a team that even more so, and this is the same thing with Lamar, their expectations now that if you want to break the narratives about yourself, you need to go win it. And with Lamar, people are saying he doesn't have it, that he's still a running back quarterback, and that he can't win anything. He just chokes in the playoffs. The Ravens just choke in the playoffs is kind of the narrative lately. Well, change it. This year you have to change it, or else no one is going to ever believe in you again to win a Super Bowl. Because how are you going to take a team with this much talent and not make it the Super Bowl, let alone win it? I mean, do I think they can compete and beat the Eagles? I don't know if you can say they can. I think you need to make at least an AFC championship game again, if not the Super Bowl. Because those are the expectations now set by not only you as a team with all the moves you're making, not only by your fans, but by the NFL community as a whole. Because we see the moves, we see the vision, but it's not being fulfilled. I think they could do well. I expect them to win the division again. I just don't know if Lamar is going to take that next step. If he does, and he can win a couple playoff games again, then I really think we need to start talking about Lamar as a passer differently. But right now, the conversations need to change only if they do not meet these expectations. And that seat will grow warmer under John Harbaugh if he doesn't really match the expectations set by his GM and by his owner. And going from high expectations to almost bottom level expectations again, let's talk about bust prospects. So, who do we think is going to be a potential bust? Like, if they don't do well this season, can we consider them a draft bust? I think there's a few names that we have to throw out here into this. Trevor Lawrence, does he lead the pack in this conversation? Because Trevor Lawrence, he was billed as a generational talent. Repeat, generational talent coming out of Clemson. He won a national championship. He's considered to be one of the more talented quarterbacks the league has ever seen coming into the league, and yet he has only one playoff win in his career. Now, granted, you could say the coaching staff, the players around him hasn't been great, right? For sure. And also, in this conversation as well, is Travis Etienne, who the Jaguars drafted to help back up Trevor Lawrence and be the Clemson pairing, bring back the national championship swagger to the Jaguars. With how high the expectations are, you can't help feeling but disappointed with Trevor Lawrence. He got this huge contract extension recently as well, right? How do you not feel disappointed with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne? Because these were guys expected to take the league by storm, be the next great thing, and yet they are not. Ever since the loss of the Chiefs in the AFC divisional round in 2022, these Jaguars have not looked the same. They really haven't. They got off to a horrible start, and then last year they had a great start and then fell apart. So you have opposite seasons of starting out poorly and then finishing great but missing the playoffs, and then you have a season where you start great but then finish poorly and miss the playoffs. How much of this is on Trevor Lawrence? How much of this is on the coaching staff? I really don't know. At some point, Lawrence does have to take some accountability, and I think you have to wonder if he doesn't do well this season, if that is really on him. His stats haven't been great, and same with Etienne as well. And I just kind of wonder, is Trevor Lawrence actually all that? Tyree Wilson, another guy who was really hyped coming out of Texas Tech as an edge rusher. I was kind of high on him when the Raiders drafted him, and yet he has done basically nothing since he came to Vegas. Ever since, they drafted Cleveland Farrell, they were hoping to get the next great pass rusher to pair along with Max Crosby. Tyree Wilson has not been that. I would say he's right up there with those bust prospects. If he doesn't do well this year, he doesn't have a breakout campaign, I think you absolutely have to question what Tyree Wilson is and if the Raiders drafted yet another bust. Evan Neal is an interesting one here, okay? He hasn't been great. He hasn't been bad either, right? He's been solid, but now he's transitioning to a new position this year. He's going from guard to tackle, I believe. And of course, those are two huge different skill sets that are needed for a guard and a tackle. Evan Neal has been kind of disappointing considering where he was drafted and what the expectations are for him. And now he's transitioning to a new position. If this doesn't work out and, this transition doesn't work out and he is not the player that the Giants need him to be as the stud of the offensive line, then you really need to question him as well. So yeah, those are kind of a few prospects that I kind of think if they don't have a great year next year, I think we can consider them busts. Ones that really fail to meet the expectations. They might not be Jamarcus Russell type busts, but they're busts in their own unique ways. And it's unfortunate, especially for the likes of Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, who had all the hype, or even Tyree Wilson and even Evan Neal, who all had great expectations and have just fallen flat on their face with them. And I wanted to go into another list this week and talk about our top 5 cornerback duos in the league. Now, this was a fascinating list to make for me. I had to think long and hard about this because there's a lot of good ones. It's just crazy. But here's mine. Judge me, roast me if you will. But I feel like these are the top 5 corner duos. Starting at number 5, we have Dante Jackson and Tarheeb still with the Chargers. I mean, both are ball hawks and have proven they can put up great stats. Last season, if you combine both of these stats, Still and Jackson, they had 18 total pass breakups and 9 interceptions. That's pretty good. And Dante Jackson had 14 interceptions in his last 5 campaigns, 5 of them last season. So he has had 9 in the 4 other seasons. That's pretty good. For a corner, you'll take that, right? And he was playing in Pittsburgh last year. He was solid. Still was a 5th rounder. He was out for 3 games last year with the Chargers, but then he came back and had a great debut against Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. This just feels like a tandem that they depend on picking you off and making sure they can track the ball and catch it. And to me, they are uber talented. They have a lot of potential, especially Still. I feel like he broke out last year and showed why he could potentially be a great corner in this league. Dante Jackson actually kind of had a breakout year last year in Pittsburgh. If he can build on that and still meets the potential from last season, this Chargers secondary could be very dangerous. Number 4 for me, Humphrey and Wiggins from Baltimore. Like we talked about earlier, Marlon Humphrey is incredibly versatile. He covers multiple positions, slot, outside. He only allowed a 60.9 completion percentage last season. That's incredible. One that shows why Humphrey is considered one of the more elite corners in this league. Wiggins, like I said, he has potential. He didn't make many starts, but he did show flashes. And like I said, the addition of Alexander can be a safety net in case Wiggins doesn't show that potential. But if Wiggins does, continue to build on the success he had last season, I think this Ravens secondary is going to be absolutely nasty, and you do not want to play them at all. And, like we said, Starks and Hamilton are going to be there as well to back them up. I put them low because Wiggins just has so much potential in him, but yet we don't know what that potential looks like because he was hurt for some of last season. So if I can see a full season out of him, if he still looks good, he might be higher on this list. And number 3, you have Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis III. Carlton Davis, the Patriots got him from the Lions last year after he had a great season. He only allowed a 87.6 quarterback rating or lower in his last 5 seasons, and had a completion percentage of 57.2%. In those seasons, Christian Gonzalez, he allowed a 55.7% completion percentage and a 71.7 passer rating in his 22 starts in his career. He did start out with a shoulder injury in his rookie season, and that kept him out for a while, but in 22 starts, if you're only allowing 55 and 57%, that's incredible. You're doing great. And, Davis is a great veteran presence that can help mentor Gonzalez well. To me, these are both proven commodities that will really help build the foundation, I think, for what Mike Vrabel wants to do in New England. And the secondary, I feel like it's a massive upgrade for them. I feel like this is going to really make it hard to play the Patriots. And I feel like the Patriots are their stock just keeps rising and rising in my book because they just have so many pieces on that defense, on the offense. It's kind of exciting. And, this quarterback duo is exactly one of those reasons why, because you have a rising star in Gonzalez, who's one of the top quarterback prospects in this league. And then, of course, you have Davis, who's considered a veteran presence, who's well known. You know what you're going to get with Carlton Davis. A very solid corner. It's just a great combination, and I love it for New England. Number 2 for me, Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. in Pittsburgh. Slay, of course, has one of the more stacked resumes in this league as a corner, and he's considered one of the more accomplished corners as well. Porter Jr., the crazy stat about him, he's only allowed 1 touchdown in 33 starts, despite only having 1 interception. That's insane to think about. He came into this league highly touted as a cornerback prospect. I didn't know what to think about him, but yet he's showing that he has potential. And if he can keep building on that, and if he can maybe up the interceptions and maybe, track the ball more and not just the pass breakups, it really can help lock down the backside of a Steelers defense that last season was quite porous. So to have the potential of maybe locking down a weakness in the Steelers defense and making it even more potent, that's a very positive sign for the Steelers heading into the season. When you have one of the more accomplished corners trying to help mentor a young hot blood in Porter Jr., who, man, that could be potent. That's a great player to help mentor Porter Jr. And I really think that there is a lot of potential in this secondary, especially considering the talent and the accomplishments that Slay has had and that Porter Jr. is doing as well. Number 1 for me, though, it's Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter in Houston. Stingley, he's considered one of the better corners in this league for a reason. He allowed below 48% completion percentage and was a Pro Bowler. And Lassiter, he is a rookie, but he has so much potential. And at UGA, sneakily enough, he only allowed 43% completion percentage. And with Bullock and Petrie and CJ Gardner-Johnson, that Texans secondary, it feels just as stacked as the Baltimore Ravens one. I mean, goodness, Petrie's a hard hitter. Stingley's a hard hitter. You're not going to want to mess around with this Texans secondary. They will make a statement on you. This is a hungry Texans defense, and to have this kind of a quarterback duo, if Lassiter meets that potential, I don't see why you can't consider this the top cornerback duo in the league, and why you couldn't consider the Houston secondary one of the best in the league as well. Honorable mentions were the Seahawks duo and the Niners as well. And also the Bears, Stevenson and Johnston. I just didn't feel like they quite made the cut with the potential in terms of Jackson and Still, who have a lot of good stats, and also the talent is there as well. This was kind of a fun list to just look at the stats and kind of get into the nitty gritty of. I really enjoyed it. And one of the more underrated ones is probably going to be the Niners secondary, and Lenore and Green. Green has a lot of potential. He just isn't quite yet a known commodity, and he needs to prove himself more, I think. And then, if Tyreek Stevenson can make a jump, if he can, mature a bit more and, keep proving himself, the Bears absolutely also have a quarterback duo that could be shooting up this list as well. And to me, one of the more overrated ones is the Cowboys, one in Bland and Diggs. I just don't quite see it. I feel like, Diggs gets a lot of hype, and he hasn't really shown it the last couple of years since the really good defense they had that one year. And Bland, he's walking on the history of the pick sixes that he had a couple of years ago as well. So to me, that's kind of a more overrated cornerback duo. I was reading an article about it. They had him, I think, at number 3 or 4, and it just felt way too high. I do think they're top 10, but I don't think they're that high. I would love to hear anyone's thoughts on this because it's such a fascinating conversation to have. Another interesting little tidbit that came out this week as well, the Chargers announced they were going to have 2 alternates coming out in this summer. July 15th is the release date, and there's so much potential you could do with this because the Chargers have some of the more iconic jerseys in the powder blues, right? And then, of course, you have the LT era navy blue jerseys, which had, of course, the gold outlining a white bolt, and I loved those. Those were the ones I grew up with. And I really loved the powder blue, of course, is just clean. You can't really beat powder blue. What would I think would look good? There's the Chargers horse. If they made that come back, that would be fascinating. So in my comments, I posted a short about it when it came out, the announcement. And there were comments that had everything from an all black one. And some people were saying that it looks like it could be an all powder blue. I don't know what to think about it all powder blue, to be honest, because it could be a color rush thing, like someone said. I could see it, but also I don't know if I would like that concept. I would love to see one of them be a shout out to the powder blue, right? But maybe not as flashy. Maybe make it all powder blue in the uniform. Maybe a white helmet and no numbers on it because the Chargers have loved putting numbers on helmets lately. So maybe take the numbers off. Just maybe a Charger bolt outlined in powder blue. Maybe a white with a tint of it in the helmet. A white helmet and just an all powder blue would be really good. And then a Navy LT era uniform would be really cool. I think that would just be perfect, have maybe some of not like the bold yellow or whatever color that is that they use for the lightning bolt. And there are other alternates that they have, but more of the style that they had with LT, kind of the old gold. It looked simple, but it looked good. It looked clean on that navy. And I think that would be really cool if you could have from head to toe, maybe. I don't know. That'd just be me. Maybe some silver pants with those navies. That would be really cool as well. And have on the side the lightning bolt going down the pants. That'd be really cool. I think, there's so many possibilities you can have with alternate uniforms, and you just hope they don't botch it up. That would be quite interesting if they did botch it up. And, some fans care, some fans don't. I don't think a lot of fans really care about it, but, it's still fascinating to talk about because it's the off season, but at the same time, uniforms are kind of fascinating to me, especially since, there's a lot of iconic jerseys in NFL history and you want to celebrate those. And I think making 2 uniforms to celebrate those would be awesome. And if not, they're trying to totally rebrand it. That would be fascinating as well. That's the NFL side of this. Let's head pitch side because we have some interesting stuff going on the pitch. Middlesbrough hired Rob Edwards to be their manager. He had a not so great exit from Luton Town last year. They were expected to be at the top of the championship. They floundered quite a bit. They lost to Middlesbrough 5-1 at the Riverside, and it wasn't long after that Edwards was canned. And this is a guy that took them from League One to back-to-back promotions all the way up to the Premier League. Did very well in the Premier League. Almost kept them up a couple of years ago when they were in the Premier League. And they just didn't do quite enough, but they were still very competitive, very feisty. And this is a guy that likes to play with a very aggressive pressing tactic. He loves to not let the defense rest, makes sure his attackers are very much on top of you and trying to win the ball back and score from easy positions. He also is a guy who likes to be very disciplined, and he wants to keep his guys at the back very disciplined and, not roaming around. He just wants to be very solid at the back. And I think that addresses a lot of the concerns that people had with Michael Carrick. Of course, people loved Carrick because he brought a very flamboyant, fun style of football to the Riverside, and he just disappointed people. And I think people wanted to continue that. They want Danny Roll, I think, and getting Rob Edwards is kind of a disappointment for them just because of that. Uh, Edwards did work with the director of football, Kieran Scott, and I think Scott really liked him. But I don't think this is just a cheap salary grab. I do think that Edwards is probably one of the better options for you to have if you're Middlesbrough. You want to make sure that your defense is solid at the back after your defense wasn't very solid. It was very porous and gave up weird, bizarre goals at times. And I just think you want a defense that's solid. You want to be disciplined. You want a coach that's passionate, can connect with the fans. So I feel like some people are just not giving him an opportunity. People are also really complaining about him. Maybe the rumors of him hiring Michael Beale and Henry Watling as part of his backroom staff, and everyone's saying, oh, how they ended disastrously at Rangers. I don't know if we can, judge people just based on the past. Beale hasn't had a great career at Sunderland when he managed briefly there after they fired their last manager before Labrie. I think you have to give him a chance because if you're just going to be that way, why are you a fan if you're just going to complain about a manager hire that to most people is very solid hire? Bristol City also got their guy. They hired Gerhard Struber, and he is a guy that had some success with Barnsley. Wasn't huge or anything, but still he had some success with them. He worked at a couple other clubs. I do think this could be interesting because Bristol City have the talent, right? They have the promise and the ability to do it. They made the playoffs last year, right? I do think, though, that series against Sheffield United showed a lot of the weaknesses that Bristol City need to address in this transfer window if they want to keep contending for the playoffs. And, of course, you're going to have a totally different system now with Struber coming in. It's not going to be Manning's system. I would be fascinated to see how the Robins attack this transfer window. And same with Middlesbrough, really, because new managers, you want to get them in and make sure you're addressing the needs that you think the club needs. So give these both a transfer window, and I think we'll really start to see what they want to do with their respective clubs. QPR as well is also, I think, like we talked about, they're closing in on that French guy from Rennes. And I don't know quite what to think. It feels like a very mid hire as well. I just don't know if he's going to be the guy, especially after you're finishing mid-table with Rennes in League One, considering he won a Coupe de France not long ago either. So I don't know. It feels very much like a QPR hire. These Fuentes didn't quite work out. But, it's just how it is. It's going to be fascinating to see where these managers take their clubs. A lot of people are saying, these Middlesbrough might take a step back. I don't think so. They have a lot of talent in the club, and I think people are kind of underestimating that. And so it's going to be fascinating to see after these transfer windows what the clubs will look like and how the season could be approached by their respective managers. Another manager news, Sheffield United, not Sheffield Wednesday. We'll get to Wednesday in a bit. But Sheffield United, after the end of season review, sacked Chris Wilder. I have no idea why. This guy got them to the third in the championship, and, he's a local guy. He played for Sheffield United. Fans love him. He's well loved in that community, and yet he's sacked, and he didn't want to leave. And I don't know what in the world is going on there, but they decided to hire Ruben Sellers to replace him. We're averaging a little over a point at Hull City, and you barely get them by relegation. I just don't know if that's the guy you want to manage a team that wants to get back to the Premier League ASAP. This is a guy you want to get right back to the Premier League, right? And you have the players to do it. You were a Kiefer Moore bad pass away from extra time in the Championship playoff final, and now you're just gonna hand it to Ruben Sellers? I don't know. This seems to me like a move that could potentially undo all the hard work Chris Wilder did in building that team up. And that just feels like a risky move. If I was a Blades fan, I would be so mad that we go from Chris Wilder to Ruben Sellers. and now the season looks completely different. Who knows who's going to go in, who's going to go out with all these manager changes. You never know what those changes are going to look like. It's just crazy to think about. Sheffield Wednesday. Now we're getting to the Wednesday. I think we talked about them in a few episodes ago, how they haven't been paying their players, and they barely scraped by not getting a transfer ban last time. However, they weren't so lucky this time, as yesterday it was announced that they will have a 3 transfer window fee restriction or transfer ban. So basically, each transfer window, which is kind of like free agency, you get the ability to sign players, and you can also sell players. Well, guess what? Sheffield Wednesday is not going to be able to buy anything to upgrade their squad. I don't know how Danny Rule hasn't resigned yet. How has Danny Rule not just lost his ever-loving mind at Sheffield Wednesday? He has a £6 million buyout clause. I mean, he was connected to a lot of the jobs now, like Middlesbrough, Bristol City, and a couple of others, like Southampton is still looking for a manager. I think he's still the leading candidate there, perhaps. He hasn't gone yet. And now, this is a move that could just damage a club. They are not going to be able to improve this squad until 2027. Winter window. That's just insane, right? I just don't know how in the world it's gonna work out, and I'm just baffled by how in the world Sheffield Wednesday thinks they're going to be able to compete when they already have a very poorly constructed squad as is. Roll has been able to somehow take that squad and make them competitive. They finished mid-table, upper mid-table, by the way. And Danny Rowland gets a lot of that credit. Chansiri needs to go. They really need to do what they did with the Reading owner and do that to Chansiri, the Sheffield Wednesday owner. Man, this club is, I feel for the fans of Sheffield Wednesday, because how are they supposed to have any hope that they can compete or do anything besides maybe just go down and down and down? Can we expect them to be a relegation candidate this season or maybe next season? I think that's a great possibility. I wouldn't be shocked if they're right there with Blackburn Rovers, Hull City, Oxford United, and a couple others, Preston North End. I wouldn't be shocked if they're right there with them, because this is just baffling that you are not paying your players. How are you not paying your players? That's kind of the basic agreement when you get a player. Just sign and you offer to pay them certain amounts of money. If you're not able to do that, why are you even the owner? Why are you even owning this club except for just like a money investment? At this point, that money investment is looking like it's turning into a bad investment because of how poorly your ownership is going. And that is just awful. I feel bad for Danny Roll. I feel bad for the Wednesday fans. If Roll leaves, this club is in shambles, and I don't think you're going to be able to repair it anytime soon. Wrexham, there's some swirling talk that Rob and Ryan may not be the controlling owners for much longer. And this is coming from the Wrexham Insider, where there's like a £350 million stock that's being offered out for a huge share. It's not the controlling share still, but it's being bandied about that they might just take the money and leave. I don't see it happening personally. I think they love the club too much. They're invested in it enough. If they do leave, it's a rather scummy move. I just don't see it happening. They've had such great potential, right? They've gone from back to back to back promotions from National League all the way up to the championship. And now they have a chance to do something special. If this is true, that could be huge for the club, because obviously they'll need to vet new owners and all that. And it could be huge in terms of implications for like Phil Parkinson and the backroom staff and what the new owners might want to do. However, of course, this is all just speculation. It's just fascinating to see that these are local rumors, like from the Wrexham reporters, that are saying that this could be a possibility. I want to quickly go over the Premier League fixtures, and we see a lot of these huge matchups. Match week 1, we see Liverpool kicking off against Bournemouth to start their title defense at Anfield. Nottingham Forest take on Brentford. Aston Villa v Newcastle looks fascinating. I'm excited to see Newcastle and Sunderland taking on each other twice in a huge local rivalry. That's going to be a fun one. You're going to see the likes of Leeds back in the Premier League. There's so many fascinating little storylines here. You're going to see Manchester City Liverpool around week 11. And then match week 15, you're going to see Thomas Frank take on his former club for the first time as manager of his new club in Tottenham Hotspur. That should be fun to see how that little match goes, because I bet you some tensions will be high from both sides, especially from Brentford. And then, of course, you have the likes of like Burnley and Wolves looking at like a relegation scrap at the final week. There's a lot of fun little rivalries kind of popping up here. So you always got to look out for, the Manchester City, Manchester United, and of course Merseyside, even though Merseyside is hyped up a lot more than it probably should. But still, it's very fascinating now with the schedule out to see where you'll be able to go and what tickets you can buy. And it's just always fun as a fan to see what fixtures are going to be when and what to look forward to. So always look forward to the fixture release date. EFL fixture release day, by the way, June 26th. So that's coming up quick. And we're going to have some content on that for sure. So, the big news, and this is all still speculation, but we have it on good source that Southampton might have leaked a schedule. Now, of course, in the EFL, this is a huge no-no. They like keeping the schedule very close to the chest. They don't like it at all when anything is leaked or anything is shown about the fixtures until fixture release day. And on the ticket website for Southampton, there is a screenshot of them offering tickets for a week 1 matchup against Birmingham City. Of course, Birmingham City is going to be one of the huge fixtures for anyone in the championship just because of the pedigree of their owners, and they're considered one of the more up-and-coming squads in the EFL. Obviously, they're a huge match and people want to go to that. So that being leaked out, it just brings up a lot of huge consequences because if true, there could be some massive repercussions, including like fines, maybe a points deduction perhaps. And of course they would deserve it if they, broke the rules and this is actually true. Then, they deserve it, but still, man, that's huge. And I want to compare this real quick because the NFL loves to, before their schedule actually officially comes out, they have the schedule release. And I've talked about this before, right? But the schedule release leaks always just ruin the schedule release for me. And I love how the EFL does it. And this feels very much like a American leak the schedule before the schedule comes out type thing. And give people a preview of what they might have. I feel like this is kind of why, because people don't like the spoilers and they kind of just want to wait and know all at once. And I respect that. I really do. I feel like that's the right way to go about releasing a schedule. And that's something the NFL could get better at. Make it a bit more suspenseful for the fans and, make it a bit more fun. And then when it comes out, people can, get all the hype out and be excited and see what games they can go to and all that. I don't know, it's just fascinating because you compare it to the EFL and NFL and how similar, maybe dissimilar their fans and their culture is. It really feels more like a button-down culture in the EFL versus NFL is not as buttoned down. It's more casual. They kind of tend to appeal to more of the internet generation. So it's fascinating to think about just comparing the two, especially since we covered both here on the show. And the implications are just huge just because that's not really approved of by the EFL and there could be some serious repercussions, not only just in terms of fining, but also maybe how Southampton starts their season as well. All right, it's time for a new segment. It's our favorite part of the show now, where you take the mic. Welcome to the PitchBack, where we're going to have listener questions, hot takes, anything you throw our way. We put out a question on our Instagram and our Facebook asking you, the listener, to give us any questions or hot takes or whatever that you have on your mind. And so let's go see what the grids got buzzing today. So Fun Football Podcast asks, what are our AFC contenders? Well, I would say right now you have a different dichotomy range of what contenders are. I think you have the elite teams. So we're going to say the Bills, Ravens, and Chiefs are probably at the top tier of that contender pyramid, shall we say. The Texans, Broncos, and Chargers are right below that in my opinion. And then after that, it kind of just, it goes downhill from there. But if we're talking about like who could actually win the AFC, I think you're going to go anywhere from the Bills, Ravens, Chiefs, Texans, and then maybe the Broncos or Chargers, depending on health and all that kind of stuff. Also, Sundays for the League asked, is Jalen Hurts a top 5 quarterback? And who would you consider better? Yes, I do think Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback. I did an episode where I put him 5th, I think it was 2 episodes ago, where I did a quarterback ranking, and I said that it was Hurts. I think it was then Lamar, then Boro, and then Allen, and then Mahomes. I think he needs to prove a little bit more in terms of winning consistently, but he's got all the talent, all the ability in the world. If he wins another Super Bowl or two, he's going to catapult up this list even further. Cheese and Bear Pod asked, what NFL players could play soccer right now and be successful? So I had a little fun with this. I went with some guys from the AFC and NFC if we had like 3-a-side teams. So in the AFC, I went with Tyreek for a striker or an attacker because in today's soccer, you like to have a guy who's quick, who's agile, who's twitchy and athletic, but can also score. And I think Tyreek could actually do pretty good. He has a lot of confidence, and I think he could do really well at that. And then for the striker for the NFC, I went with Kyler Murray because he's quick, he's short, he's got a lot of the same intangibles as Tyreek, but I feel like as a quarterback, he might be even more accurate on shooting the ball. Though I would say that Kyler could actually do well if he was put on a soccer pitch. I really do. And for the AFC, I went for a midfielder and Roquan Smith from the Ravens. I feel like Roquan would just dominate possession in midfield. He's so physical and just tough in general. Trying to win the ball back from him almost feels like an impossible task. Now his ball control skills might be a little iffy, but you kind of want a midfielder who you can dominate possession with, who can help you take the ball away rather quickly with a sturdy challenge, and that would absolutely be Roquan Smith. From the NFC, I went with Zach Bond from the Eagles. I feel like he's kind of very similar to Roquan in a lot of ways. I mean, you could go with like an attacking midfielder, but I felt like Bond would just be another great possession-driven midfielder, and I feel like he could lay a very sturdy challenge if needed to win back the ball. And for defenders, I went with Nick Bolton for the AFC, just because I feel like he's very instinctive. He knows how to lead a defense, and he knows how to diagnose any situation quickly. He also is very tall and lanky as well, and so I could see him easily being able to head a ball very well, which you need in a defender in soccer. And then for the NFC, I went Alex Anzalone because of a lot of the same reasons. 3 guys, 6 balls asked what our fantasy quarterback rankings were. So I went with a top 5. So at 5, I had Matthew Stafford. I feel like with him and Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams that this offense could be really good in LA. I feel like he could put up a lot of points passing. He's not going to put up the rushing stats though. Number 4, it's kind of similar with Joe Burrow. He's going to put up ungodly stats at passing. He's going to probably be one of the passing leaders again, like he was last season. I just don't see him rushing a ton. Jalen Hurts, I have at number 3. I feel like he's going to be great. A lot of the push stats are going to help him with touchdowns as well as also passing with a great offense that the Eagles have. Lamar is number 2 for me. I feel like, again, you can always count on him for a lot of rushing touchdowns. And when healthy, his passing is improved. He had the best completion percentage of his career last season. I feel like he's only going to get better. And of course, I put the MVP at number 1, Josh Allen. I feel like he's the best quarterback in terms of fantasy because he can rush, he can pass. He's just very dependable when it comes to just being a great quarterback in this league, especially when it comes to fantasy. Royally Quacked. They asked, who is making the top 4 in the EPL, and does Wrexham make a top 4 charge next season? In the top 4 of the EPL, you kind of feel like it's going to be the same, so I'm kind of going to go with Liverpool at the top because they're defending champs. And I feel like they've only gotten better with the moves they've made already, which is scary to think about because they were already really good last season. And then you have Arsenal, who are, I think, the second best team, and they're only going to get better, I think, this year if they address the right position, including striker, particularly. And then you have Chelsea, who I think will probably be right there. And I'm going to go with Newcastle. I feel like they've taken a step forward last season. And I think they could maybe, if Manchester City doesn't, right their ship this year after selling Kevin De Bruyne, they're going to have a few adjustments this season. Maybe Manchester City takes a step back to 5th. It's so close. I could absolutely see Manchester City being 4th as well. With Wrexham, when it comes to Wrexham, I feel like a lot of people are expecting them to be top 4. I don't think that's a realistic expectation. When you come from the National League, you can have easily a team that can compete in League 2 and League 1 rather easily. You don't have to make a ton of adjustments. However, when you get to the championship, that is a whole different ball game, in my opinion. It's going to take a lot of adjustments. I think Wrexham have a lot of needs on the defensive and the attacking side. And they absolutely, I think, need to address goalkeeper if they want to compete in the championship. Right now, they haven't made a ton of moves. I just think a realistic expectation is to just try to survive this season. And then next year, make that top 4 push. Because always when you come up from League One, you just kind of want to survive the first year, get that extra money into your coffers, because the championship provides you a lot more money than does League One and League Two. And then when you get the extra money that the championship provides, then you can absolutely spend it and try to get some more transfers. Of course, Wrexham are a bit more of an advantage, like with Birmingham City, because they have better owners and that can provide extra money. But I do think that they might face a bit of a challenge there in trying to survive the championship. Garage Time asked what our winners of each NFC division were. I went with the Eagles. I don't think there's much explanation here besides just they're the defending Super Bowl champions, and they really haven't changed much besides their defense. But I still think the Eagles are class in the NFC. So I would put them as the winners of the NFC East. NFC South, the Bucks, in my opinion, are going to win this division. I do think Atlanta, if Michael Penix can take the next step, will be a good contender. However, I think the Bucks are just the more complete team. They have a great young defense that is only growing and getting better. Baker Mayfield on the offensive side of the ball. You have some great weapons in Ibuka and McMillan and Evans and Godwin. And then, of course, you have Bucky Irving and Rashad White. My word, it's a stacked offense there in Tampa. And if they can transition well from Cohen to the next offensive coordinator, I think Baker could be a fringe MVP candidate this year. NFC North, I do think it's the Lions who are going to win that division until proven otherwise. I do think they are a really good team. They really didn't change much. They added DJ Reed to the mix in the corner spot, which is a huge upgrade compared to what they've had at the corner spot. Injuries are going to be huge for Detroit. If they can stay injury-free, Aiden Hutchinson's coming back, they're going to have a better pass rush. I think they could just have as potent an off-season as they did last year. And then for the NFC West, I think I kind of hinted it earlier, but I do have the Rams winning the division. Just this offense with Adams and Nakua and Higbee and Williams. It's just a great offense in general. And then, of course, you have Sean McVay, one of the top coaches in this league, guiding that offense. And then, of course, you have a defense that's only young and only getting better. That was a good, the Jerry White show, they asked, who improved more in the offseason, Pittsburgh or New England? I do think Pittsburgh upgraded in a lot of positions of need, right? And especially on defense. They also traded for DK Metcalf, who, if he plays well and is in a right frame of mind, can be an absolute weapon at wide receiver 1. Rodgers is, of course, going to be the huge storyline, the huge question. If he plays like he did the second half of the season, stat-wise, he could actually make this work. However, that's a big if. Who knows what kind of antics will be brought up during the season. He's already complaining about helmets and stuff. But to me, it's the Patriots. I really do think the Patriots upgraded the most. They had a fantastic draft. I gave them an A+ for it. And like we talked about earlier, they have some great cornerback duo in Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez. I do feel like they upgraded on the offense, gave it some much needed wide receiver depth. You have Diggs, you have Kyle Williams, you have Keyshawn Butte, and a couple of others. Like, my word, it's a great wide receiver room. I think the Patriots have gone from like a top 5 pick. I think they'll be either close to the playoffs or making the playoffs. And I think that's such a huge step in Mike Vrabel's first year. I just think there's a lot of good vibes coming out from New England. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions for the show. Really greatly appreciate it, and I'm glad you guys want to interact with us on the show. Hopefully this becomes more of a regular thing. I really enjoyed hearing all the questions and thinking about some of the topics y'all brought up. It was really fun. And with that, that's it for this episode of the Pitch Grid. Thanks so much for joining us. If you're watching on YouTube, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Listening on Spotify or Apple, a rating or follow goes a long way. We'll be back soon with more chaos, commentary, and coverage from the championship and the NFL. Until next time, stay sharp, y'all.